tonight, 4 months after an earthquake and tsunami devastated Japan and set off a nuclear crisis, Japan has announced it is banning all shipments of cattle raised in the Fukushima prefecture. Now, that's the location of the damaged nuclear power plant that has been leaking radiation still. The cattle ban comes after contaminated meat from cows in the area ended up at Japanese stores and restaurants. Now, the government investigated the farm that the meat came from. It's about 18 miles from the plant. It found radiation levels in hay that the cows ate were up to 57 times higher than the government's maximum allowance. Now, just last week, Japanese health officials tried to downplay the dangers of radiation in the meat. A state minister in charge of food safety said he didn't think small portions would have any long-lasting effects on humans. But now, with the ban, there are new questions about how much the government is doing to prevent contaminated food from ending up on dinner tables. And there are still lingering questions about how forthright the government is in announcing any progress in fixing the damaged nuclear power plant as well. So joining me to talk about this from Tokyo is Kyung Law, and in Hong Kong, Michael Friedlander, who has 13 years of experience as a senior operator at 3 power plants. Kyung, it's hard to believe 4 months later we're still talking about this. The way I understand it is last week the Japanese government insisted that tainted beef was safe if consumed only in small portions, and today all the beef has been banned. This seems like a sudden change. What happened here exactly?
Well, it is a very sudden change, Sanjay, and we don't know if the government was purposely trying to downplay this, but it certainly gives the impression to the consumer that the government doesn't have a handle of this problem, because now talk about a huge 180. Early on, when the government did make those statements, what the government was talking about is perhaps a handful of cows. Well, now this crisis is expanding. It has expanded every single day. We're now talking about 550 to 650 cows, meat that has been shipped across the country, and those numbers are ticking upwards every single day. The question consumers should be asking now is, what about the feed and the cows that have been contaminated outside of the Fukushima prefecture? That's already happened. What about that meat? What is the government going to do to contain that crisis? So a lot of consumer concern out there, Sanjay.
Yeah, and it's fair to say, Kyung, as you say, that it's tough to say what there was any intention to deliberately mislead, but there have been concerns in the past about all sorts of things. I mean, when I was there, contaminated spinach, milk, tea leaves, fish. This just seems, on appearances, to be very mishandled. Is there faith in the Japanese government assurances about the food supply overall?
Well, when you talk to consumers, especially if you go to the grocery store, they say they don't really know. Because when they go to the grocery store, it's very similar. The meat aisle is very similar to anything you'd see in the United States. The meat that you buy is packed in cellophane. It's very tidy. But you don't know what that cow was fed. You don't know where it came from. So you have to trust the government. And the question now is, if you do not trust the government to control what that cow has been fed, if that meat that you're about to set in front of your child is going to be safe, then yes, it's a huge concern, because you don't know what to eat. You don't know beyond that. Is chicken going to be okay? And as you mentioned, is fish going to be okay? An even bigger staple of the Japanese diet.
Let's talk about the plant for a second as well, Michael. The government and TEPCO say they've completed the first step of their cleanup plan, and they are on track to begin the next phase. You don't buy that. Why not?
Right. We've seen that they've installed a number of pieces of temporary equipment over the last several weeks, but we've also seen that it's only operating at about a 70% capacity compared to what it needs to be. They've had all kinds of operator problems in terms of venting the system. They've had equipment problems, and then quite honestly, Sanjay, if you take a look at this equipment, and remember now, this equipment is actually going to have to be used for years to come. This is not a temporary piece of equipment. It's made of PVC pipe and plastic piping. Much of it is outdoors, so I just have my doubts about this equipment. Stopgap measure, of course, but in terms of a long-term stable condition, I'm not sure. And in terms of the reactors, quite honestly, the reactors are almost in the same situation they were in the early days of the accident. They're still on a feed and bleed situation in terms of injecting water. The water leaks out of the holes in the building. They take it off, they clean it up, and they inject it back in. So they're far from a stable situation with reactors.
It is, again, it's remarkable to hear that from you this many months after this all happened. To add to that, Michael, as you know, Typhoon Ma-on is headed for Japan, but I guess right now forecasts say that it could miss the crippled nuclear plant. But it is typhoon season. there. I mean, what sort of precautions, if any, are being taken place to protect Fukushima?
The only thing that I saw them doing, as you say, in preparation for the landfall of the typhoon, they were putting a roof over the turbine building. But as you say, we still have 3.5 months of typhoon season here, and they're on the east side of Japan. So there's a good chance that over the course of the next weeks and months that this will be repeated again and again.
Wow. Well, fingers crossed for the people living there, and well wishes to them. Kyung Law, Michael Friedland.
Okay.